People spend way too much time screening and not nearly enough time meeting. I would say if they're not a serial killer and they don't have two heads and they have never been arrested, you should meet them for coffee.
Hello and welcome back to our channel. I'm Genevieve, the fairy godmother of matchmaking. And if you're new here, you may recognize me as the matchmaker featured on Married at First Sight in the UK. Today, I'm here with award-winning author, speaker, teacher, and psychologist, Dr. Avrum Weiss. His groundbreaking book, Hidden in Plain Sight, How Men's Fears of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationship, stands as a testament to the transformative work. So for many years, Dr. Weiss has been exploring the depths of men's internal worlds. He brings us a refreshing take on deeper understanding between men and women. And we're really excited to have him here as an expert with his insight to talk to us as to what it's like dating from the inside mind of a shrink, basically.
Yep.
So we want your perspective today, and we want to sort of pick your brains and unravel a little bit more. So welcome and thank you. Thank you.
Good to see you again. Glad to be back.
Lovely to see you. Nice to have you back. So what's the most important thing for you when it comes to thinking about men and dating?
I would say not exclusively to men, but to people in general. Dating has become a task for many people. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to imagine attraction, much less magic, happening when it's a task. So the number one thing I try to communicate to people is, if you have a date with somebody this Saturday night, to rather than bringing out your list of, things you think you have to say or things that you're trying to examine, it's not a job interview. If you're going out with somebody on a Saturday night, hopefully it's to have a good time. And I think if you approach it with that, a lot of good things happen. I think you're much more likely to be your best self if you approach it.
I completely agree with you. I mean, people at the moment are generally describing dating as miserable and filling them with anxiety and with terror. Yes. What's happened, do you think, to make it become such a terrifying ordeal?
I think that it's the online programs have happened. It's like everything else. I think one of the great advantages of the work you do is that it's personalized.
Yeah.
But when you go on fair game, I met my wife online. So I'm not just knocking online programs. It worked for me, but it worked for me a long time ago. And I think it's become so inundated, and it's also gotten reduced down to pretty much a picture of you. So what attracted me to my wife online was her description of herself. Me, nice looking woman too.
Yeah.
It wasn't the be all and end all. I was trying to get a sense of who she was as a person. And she will say to this day that she knew from reading my profile that we were, before she met me, that we were a good fit. I don't think you can know that from a picture. So if you reduce, it's like instead of reading books, reading Twitter. It's like,
yeah,
I don't think Twitter's a bad thing, but I don't think you learn as much. If you want to learn about what's happening in Ukraine right now, I don't think Twitter is going to be your best source of in-depth information about that. I think you're going to have to read something that was written by someone who gave it a lot more study. And I would say the same thing. People spend way too much time screening and not nearly enough time meeting. I would say if they're not a serial killer and they don't have two heads and they have never been arrested, you should meet them for coffee.
And how do you know? How do you know all of those things?
It's what they're telling you anyway. Right, exactly.
If you're online, you don't know their background.
But
one of the problems is,
Go ahead, sorry.
No. I was going to say, one of the problems is a lot of people online are not there because they want to date. They're there to pass time. They use it as, a therapy in lots of instances.
Right. Because they're used to that, because they're in a lot of other online forums and they sort of relate to, but I think people are just overthink it. I think if you're going to do it online, it's just a way to meet people. It's really not any different than Meetup. But of course, the advantage of matchmaking service is somebody's doing a lot of that work for you. And hopefully the people you're meeting are, at least there's a reasonable chance that you'll be compatible. So it certainly saves a lot of time.
It does. And it's safer. And we know that they're already in a relationship and they've been vetted and they don't have the felonies and other things that we don't know when we're online, but people take that risk. Now, we've heard a lot of good and bad advice about staying calm before you meet a new potential partner. What's your advice about managing anxiety when it comes to dating? And especially if you've gone on a first date, you've got on well, and it's coming up to that all-important second date. I think this is where it often goes wrong. The first date, you like each other, you make that connection, and then the nerves start setting in, and your brain starts taking you into a totally different world. What's your advice?
Well, I think the other thing that happens at that second date is, first of all, on the first date, you probably hear very little of what the other person has to say. I think you're so anxious and so eager to make an impression. If I asked you right when you came out of the date, well, what does she do for a living? I'm not sure you could tell me, right? The second date, you probably settle down enough to actually really get to know the person. So you have all of these hopes built up in the first date that are basically not based on a lot. And so you're in a vulnerable position because all of your hopes are subject to meeting reality in that second date. And so I think the thing is to limit your expectations. I don't know, you have to limit your anxiety, because, anxiety happens when you're doing something exciting too. So I think you want a little bit of anxiety. How do you know the person you're with is interested? Well, they're a little anxious. They spill their water, or they trip over the rug, or, they're fumbly. Oh, they're anxious. They're excited about this.
They're wanting to make a good impression.
Exactly.
But women are very critical, and men can be critical too, but women in particular are very critical about men's behavior on a date, that fumbliness, that awkwardness. What can we say to women to reassure them that give the guy a second chance? And what can we say to guys to make them feel more comfortable about what's just happened?
I always suggest to people that unless things went horribly wrong on the first date, you should have a second date, because nobody puts their best foot forward in a first date. And when you meet people twice, you get more than twice as much information about them than just meeting them once. So if the first date was okay, then I recommend a second date, because I think you get a much broader idea of who the person is. And in terms of being critical, you're just looking in the wrong direction. What you should be tracking is not his behavior or her behavior, but your feelings, how it is for you to be with this person, because that's what's really going to be enduring. If you come home feeling like $1 million and I'm a great person and I'm so attractive, that was a good experience. That's how you feel when you're with this person. Who wouldn't want to repeat that?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a 3-date rule. And the reason I introduced 3 dates is the first one, no one is ever their authentic self. They're there just to check out that the person is the person that they were hoping it would be. And all I say to people is look for the curiosity. If you're curious enough to go on a second date, that's a good sign. That's all you need. Because I think some of the things that people get stuck on are the negatives and looking for negatives rather than positives, which is really difficult.
It's also just a way to meet another interesting person.
I know, without putting too much weight on it. I'm going to marry this person. I've just seen their profile, but I'm going to marry them. That's a nightmare. That's one of my biggest.
I'll tell you, my favorite experience when I was dating is I met a woman online and we're chatting, and she says, I'm an attorney for a big pharma company. And I said, wow, I might have a problem with that. So we started talking about our positions on certain political issues. And I asked her, this is back away, I asked her about the Affordable Care Act. When we met, at dinner, we decided to have dinner. And I asked her about the Affordable Care Act. And she said to me, have you read it? I said, no, it's 1,000 pages long. She said, I've read it. And we had an amazing evening. I mean, I'd never met anybody who read an entire piece of legislation. We did not see each other again. We were not romantically inclined, but what an enjoyable evening.
Absolutely. And it is all about experiences, because you never know where these experiences are going to lead to. So I think having that open mind, but then that leads me on to vulnerability, because vulnerability is something that we know is needed to take that connection from the first, second, third date to a longer term relationship.
Absolutely.
So your advice about people tapping into that vulnerability, and when it feels safe to tap into that vulnerability, how do they know?
Well, safe is a loaded word these days.
I know. Maybe I shouldn't use that word.
Well, no, I just think we have to be clear about how we're using it. Because I think safe has become used as a word that means uncomfortable. Safe and uncomfortable are not the same thing, because when you're in a situation that's not safe, you should leave. When you're in a situation that is uncomfortable, that might be a good thing. That might be a situation that you can grow from. That might be a situation that develops more resilience or strength. And so I don't want people to go on a date thinking that they won't be uncomfortable, because they probably will be uncomfortable. And I don't want them to misinterpret that as a bad thing.
So that's great. And actually, I'm really glad that we've discussed that, because a lot of people do say, I didn't feel safe. And when we ask them, well, why didn't you feel safe? Actually, what you're talking about is that comfortability more than the safety side, because no one's put anyone in an unsafe position, but they may challenge them and may challenge their thought process, which makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable. But that's a good thing.
Or they may just feel uncomfortable because they're feeling stronger feelings than they do on a daily basis. And that's kind of what we're hoping happens. So if you haven't been close, if you haven't met a new person that you were really attracted to for a while, it's probably going to feel a little uncomfortable.
And I love that, because people often misinterpret that uncomfortable feeling for I'm not interested in somebody, or, this isn't going to work for me. People would rather focus that as a negative connotation than look at it as something positive, and to step them into that vulnerable, taking ownership of their own journey.
And then that goes to what you said earlier about then people start to screen potential candidates on the basis of whether or not they think they might make them feel uncomfortable. And that eliminates everybody.
Well, it does. And this is often why people don't get past a first date. And when we look at patterns, it's often their view and their take on what a date should be about, rather than the reality of the situation.
I worked with a guy once who was, every first date was a masterpiece. He spent hundreds or maybe thousands of dollars. He created these amazing experiences, and he couldn't understand why nobody wanted to go on a second date with him after he created. And I said, well, why were you doing that? You haven't met her. It's completely false. You're coming across that's not you, because there's nothing between you. You've never even met. And so it's off-putting to people because it's not real.
Get to know someone and make an authentic date for that person. That's around something that you've both talked about and you both enjoy, rather than, creating this fantasy world to impress somebody.
And the person on the receiving end, the person on the receiving end does not feel comfortable with that.
No, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
That's a good way of saying it.
So what would you class as a great first date for someone to go on?
A great first date to me is when you had a great time and you're excited to see the person again. That's, I think, fabulous. And it's pretty straightforward.
And do you think people should keep the first date simple?
I do. And I have mixed feelings about, although I've used the example several times about coffee date, that is really increasing the degree of difficulty by quite a bit, because sitting and having nothing to do but talk with somebody you just met, if you meet somebody at a party, you have, I'm going to go get an appetizer. I'm going to go do this. Oh, there's so-and-so. Two people having coffee who don't know each other, it might go well. but it's a lot of pressure. I really prefer people go do something fun.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I think if you can make each other laugh on the first date, you've got that connection.
Absolutely.
On a totally different level. You're
Right.
not sitting there. It doesn't become this awkward interview, which so many people feel
Can happen.
that they're coming out of having had an interview with someone rather than a romantic date. Dating should be fun. It should be light. It should be fun. It should be enjoyable. You should be wanting to spend more and more time with somebody once you've met them.
And I think you also, on a first date, can invite somebody to do something interesting that you know about and you like to do.
Yeah.
Because then it's you're providing an experience. Let's say that you, I saw a great, David Letterman did an interview with Kevin Durant, who's one of the greatest basketball players in the world, and they ended up playing shuffleboard together and having a lot of their conversations. Well, it was great. That was the best part of the interview. I don't remember who of them was into shuffleboard. I think it was Letterman who was into shuffleboard, and Durant loved it. He was really getting into it, and you could see how the shuffleboard helped them to talk to each other.
No, I love that. So top tips, keep it fun, keep it simple.
Yes.
Bring out the curiosity for both of you. And that should lead to a second date.
Unless you have a really compelling reason, assume that this is part one of 2 or 3 parts, because it takes that long to really get to know much about a person. I
love that. Avrum, thank you.
You're so welcome.
This has been great. This has been informative.
Always
And
a pleasure.
I want to tell all our viewers, tune in, and we've got a lot more of this to come moving forward. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Take care.